Juan Salvador Guzmn Tapia was a Chilean judge. He was the first Chilean judge to lead investigations and prosecute Augusto Pinochet for violations of human rights during his dictatorship between 1973 and 1990. As a special prosecutor, he used novel legal strategies to hold Pinochet and members of his military regime accountable for the killings and human rights violations during this period. Guzmn was born on the 22nd of April 1939 into a Chilean diplomatic family of Basque descent in San Salvador, El Salvador. His father Juan Guzmn Cruchaga was a diplomat and a poet, while his mother was involved in the arts. Having been trained in theater and sculpture, he was exposed to American culture early in his life, having spent his early years between 4 and 12 in San Francisco and Washington. He also spent time in Venezuela and Colombia, before going on to studying law at the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile and obtaining a postgraduate degree from the University of Paris in the late 1960s. Guzmn started his career as a regional magistrate in the early 1970s and went on to become an appeals court judge in Santiago and Talca by the time Augusto Pinochet gave up power in the early 1990s. Speaking of his early years as a conservative, Guzmn said that he and his family initially cheered as Pinochet overthrew democratically elected socialist president Salvador Allende in a military coup. However, this changed many years later when he learnt of the true extent of the actions undertaken by Pinochet and the secret police. Guzmn was amongst the first few judges to lead the investigation and prosecution of Pinochet for killings and other human rights violations undertaken by his regime between 1973 and 1990. Through the 1990s and early 2000s, Guzmn led a risky legal campaign to fully investigate the crimes and drive redressals using a combination of novel legal strategies. Under the judicial system in force in Chile at the time, judges had both investigative and prosecutorial responsibilities in addition to presiding over the courts. When democracy returned to Chile in the early 1990s, the true extent of the human rights abuses by Pinochet and his military regime started to surface. On the 12th of January 1998, human rights lawyers in Chile submitted the first of more than 70 lawsuits against Pinochet. Guzmn was appointed to take charge of the investigation. During this time, Pinochet was arrested in London in October 1998 under orders of Spanish Judge Baltasar Garzón on charges of genocide and other crimes against Spanish citizens in Chile. However, Pinochet was finally deemed unfit for trial and returned home to Chile in March 2000 after 17 months of house arrest in London. Guzmn immediately applied to have Pinochet's legal immunity revoked and have him placed under house arrest in Santiago. Chilean investigation commissions including the Commission on Truth and Reconciliation had documented over 3,000 victims of executions and disappearances, and a different commission had estimated at least 80,000 survivors of human rights abuses. Guzmn got together a team of detectives and other forensic experts to lead the investigation. He traveled from city to city interviewing relatives of people who had been executed or had disappeared and survivors of human rights abuses. As a part of the investigations, he uncovered mass graves and secret prisons. He was often admonished by senior judges for the tactics used, including taking journalists along on these missions to document the discoveries. Pinochet had issued a blanket amnesty to his military and security officials for any crimes committed before 1978. However, Guzmn secured the arrests of the accused by applying a little-used interpretation of the 1978 auto-amnesty law. He argued that since many of the bodies of the military squad's victims were still missing, it could be argued legally that these people are still kidnapped. Therefore, Guzmn argued, the crime is continuing and neither the auto-amnesty law nor the statute of limitations can be applied until the bodies are found. The crime of permanent sequestration was created by this jurisprudence, thus permitting prosecution for the forced disappearances. In December 2000, Guzmn formally charged Pinochet for kidnapping during his 1973 to 1990 dictatorship. and questioned him for 2 hours in January 2001 after doctors said he was fit to undergo interrogation. That same month, Guzmn placed the general under house arrest in July 2001. The charges were suspended and later dropped on health grounds. In May 2004, the court stripped Pinochet again of his immunity from prosecution over fresh charges concerning Operation Condor. In September 2005, the court acceded to Guzmn's request to strip Pinochet of his immunity concerning Operation Colombo. Despite all of the efforts, Pinochet died in 2006, with charges and multiple cases continuing to remain pending. Speaking later, Guzmn would say, "The important thing is what we leave."